The forest moon of coral was not a place where sane beings chose to wander alone. Its shadows hid creatures that thrived on ambush. Its air carried the smell of ancient soil, soaked with the memories of countless hunts. Every species with access to a starship knew to stay away from the deeper regions. Only those who wished for a short life stepped into its heart. Yet one person walked through it with a calm that unsettled the observers who watched from the hovering transport above. The human named Mark moved with steady steps, as if he were strolling through a quiet park. His boots pressed into moss that shifted like breathing skin. The alien observers watched him on their monitors, each one filled with disbelief. They had invited the human along only because their diplomatic council insisted on creating stronger ties with Earth. They expected him to observe, perhaps take notes, perhaps panic. They did not expect confidence. They did not expect fearlessness. They did not expect someone who treated a death world like a hiking trail. Mark paused near a cluster of glowing fungus and knelt down. He touched one of the stalks and examined the faint blue residue on his fingertips. The watchers whispered among themselves. The researcher named Orlan gripped the side of his chair as his voice trembled. The fungus was known to trigger hallucinations in most species. The human continued on without a sign of being affected. The transport followed from above, its engines humming. Orlan kept switching through thermal and motion sensors, hoping nothing large stirred near the human. His hope lasted only a moment. Something enormous moved behind a cluster of black trees. The scanners flared red. A heat signature, the size of a heavy rover, glowed from behind a ridge. The crew stiffened. They knew what it was. The apex predator of coral. A creature the locals called a ridgeclaw. A beast with bone armor thicker than ship plating. A monster with 4 arms lined with serrated talons. It hunted in silence. It killed with precision. No one had ever survived an encounter. Orlan shouted for the pilot to warn the human. The pilot slammed the comms button. Static answered. The region was known to scramble signals. The watchers felt panic rise as the ridgeclaw began to stalk forward. Mark stood still at the base of a fallen tree. He looked left and right. He felt more than heard a shift in the air. He turned just as the ridgeclaw burst through the underbrush. Its roar shook branches loose. Its eyes burned with predatory hunger. The watchers on the transport screamed. Mark did not scream. He ducked as the ridgeclaw swung its largest arm at his head. The swipe shattered the tree trunk behind him. Bark exploded in every direction. Mark rolled, grabbed a thick vine on the ground, and pulled himself to his feet. The ridgeclaw charged. Mark met the charge head-on. The watchers froze in shock. The human ran forward instead of running away. He slid beneath the beast's first swing and grabbed its lower arm. The arm was as thick as a beam on a starship. Veins pulsed beneath bone plates. Mark tightened his grip. The ridgeclaw roared again and tried to jerk free. Mark braced his legs in the soil and twisted. The sound of tearing muscle echoed across the forest. The watchers gasped as the ridgeclaw stumbled back in confusion. Its arm hung limp. Mark leaped onto the creature's chest. His fingers hooked under the edges of its armor plates. With a shout, he pulled. The plate snapped free. Orlan pressed his hands to his face in horror. He whispered that it was impossible. The ridgeclaw tried to throw the human off. It slammed itself into a tree. Mark held on. He drove the broken plate into the beast's exposed flesh. The ridgeclaw shrieked with primal fury. Its arms flailed. Its talons scraped the ground and carved long trenches. Mark tore another plate loose. He used it like a blade. The watchers watched a human dismantle one of the most feared predators in the sector. The fight raged for minutes as the ridgeclaw tried every tactic known to its instincts. Mark refused to give ground He slammed his fist into its throat. He struck until bone cracked beneath his knuckles. The ridge claw collapsed. The forest shook as its massive body hit the ground. Mark stood over the fallen creature, breathing hard but steady. He wiped the blood and dust from his hands. He stared down at the beast with a mixture of exhaustion and respect. The forest fell silent. No creature dared move. Even the wind seemed to pause. The watchers remained frozen until Orlan finally exhaled in a shaking gasp. The pilot whispered that humans were terrifying. Mark turned his head and looked up at the transport. He lifted his hand in a casual wave. The crew scrambled to lower the ramp and bring him aboard. When Mark entered the transport, the room fell silent. Every alien stared at him with wide eyes. They had seen humans in meetings. They had seen humans in simulations. They had never seen this. Orlan stepped forward with a tablet trembling in his hands. He tried to form a sentence. Mark shrugged and rubbed his bruised forearm. He apologized for the interference with their study and asked if the creature was important to their research. Orlan shook his head rapidly. He assured the human that nothing was damaged except their understanding of biology. Mark laughed. The crew flinched at the sound. Orlan asked how the human survived. Mark replied that growing up in rough places teaches you to stay calm. He explained that the ridge claw was powerful but predictable. He added that most predators overcommit when they think victory is guaranteed. The crew exchanged looks of disbelief. The transport lifted off from the forest floor and rose through the canopy. The scanners displayed the remains of the ridge claw. The crew would need months to process what they witnessed. Mark sat down on a bench near the back and stretched his legs. He winced slightly from a deep bruise on his thigh. Orlan watched him with scientific fascination. He asked if humans routinely fought creatures that size. Mark shook his head. He explained that most days on Earth involved calmer tasks. He said that sometimes survival required strength and instinct. Orlan recorded every word. When the transport docked with a research vessel orbiting above the moon, the crew rushed to report the incident. The Council of Scientists requested a full briefing. Word spread through the halls with startling speed. By the time Mark stepped out of the transport, dozens of researchers lined the walkway. They stared at him as if he carried a star in his hands. Some backed away with fear. Others studied him with admiration. The council requested a demonstration. Mark declined and insisted that the event should not be repeated. He said that every creature deserved respect. He reminded them that he had stepped into the Ridgeclaw's territory and acted only to survive. The council thanked him for his honesty. They admitted that their understanding of human physical limits was drastically outdated. They asked if humanity had many individuals capable of such feats. Mark replied that most humans were strong in their own way. He added that courage often mattered more than physical power. The council sent that quote to their cultural archives. Over the next days, the crew studied the battlefield on the moon and examined the remains with drones. Their scientists debated endlessly. Some argued that the human possessed unique genetics. Others insisted that humans were simply that adaptable. Mark spent the days repairing equipment on the research vessel. He helped technicians lift heavy crates with ease. He assisted engineers in tasks requiring raw strength. Soon every crew member viewed humans with newly found respect. Stories spread beyond the vessel and filtered into nearby sectors. Merchants told the tale in whispers. Soldiers repeated it in training halls. Scholars added it to their study of species resilience. The legend grew. In time, the council invited Mark to speak at an interspecies summit. Representatives from a dozen civilizations gathered. They wanted to hear the human perspective on survival. Mark spoke plainly. He reminded them that fear was natural. He said that true strength came from pushing forward despite danger. His words echoed through the chamber and struck every listener with unexpected clarity. After the summit, Mark returned to the research vessel. Orlan approached him with gratitude. He admitted that before the mission he believed humans were fragile. Now he viewed them with awe. Mark smiled and told him that humans were still mortal. He said that survival required caution and empathy. Orlan nodded and promised to share that message. Weeks passed before the vessel left the coral system. Yet the story did not fade. It spread until even distant fleets repeated it during long voyages. They spoke of the lone human who faced an apex predator without fear. They spoke of the strength that defied logic. They spoke of a creature who did not hunt for glory, but fought only to live. They spoke of humanity as a force that refused to kneel before death. Mark never sought fame. He continued his work with quiet focus. He repaired machines. He shared meals with the crew. He studied new worlds with curiosity. But everywhere he went, someone whispered the tale. The research vessel visited a trading station near the edge of the sector. Crowds gathered near the docking ramps. They pointed at the human and murmured. A merchant asked if the stories were true. Mark said that stories grow taller with each retelling. The merchant laughed nervously and stepped out of his way. Later that night, a young cadet approached Mark in the cafeteria. The cadet admitted he was terrified during survival training. He asked how the human kept calm on the moon. Mark paused and chose his words carefully. He explained that fear never disappears. He said that what mattered was learning to.